Okay, welcome back, everyone. We will continue on with the Board of Chiropractic Examiners Board meeting and agenda item number 13, our Enforcement Committee report. And I would ask Dr. Adams to provide us an update.
Thank you. I will be brief as we have, due to scheduling conflicts, not had a intervening committee meeting since our last board meeting. So the information that's here is what was there essentially before. And so I think rather than review all that, but you've already heard it, it's there in front of you, very quick, short, and to the point. As Kristen pointed out in her executive office report, we're continuing to do this work on the enforcement committee, moving these kind of item by item, small little chunks forward in the process of adopting these outlines or these guidelines and regulations. We do have our next meeting on November 30th, 2023 via teleconference WebEx, and that will be from 12:30 to 2:30 on that day Pacific Standard Time. Because I think we moved the CE one from 12 to 2. I don't want to confuse the two. So what I will discuss or just add real quick is that in an effort for our outreach and consistent with our strategic planning of doing more outreach and communicating with our licensees and stakeholders, I'll be presenting a 2-hour presentation on ethics in the San Francisco District of Cal Cairo on November 2nd. And the staff is putting together the top 10 violation aspects, so it's going to be great. We're all set for that, and the board's kind of green light and fast track the approval of that process. So that's really all I have. We're moving forward, we're doing the work, and it's coming together little by little.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yep.
Yes.
I was just, what is the need for the update on the minimum retention requirements of patient records? Not when an office closes, just in general. Is there not clarity on that? I thought we were clear.
I don't think that's changing.
Well, it says further, the proposal would update the minimum retention requirements for patient records. It's on the page 2, midway of the.
It's updating, it's, for the most part, they're fine, but it's aligning the retention requirements for a minor patient with existing laws for the longer retention. I believe it's from the point of 18 plus 2 years. So it's aligning it with just the expectations for if it's a minor. That's the updates to the existing. And then also determining what to do with them in cases of if a practice closes or if they're being transferred. But it's just aligning it with, I believe it's the federal standard for maintaining records.
Okay, but the 5 years from last.
That's not changing.
Okay,
Yeah.
there it is.
Medicare 7,
Yeah.
regulars 5.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Any other discussion, questions from the board? Hearing none, I would open agenda item 13, Enforcement Committee report for public comment. Seeing, hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Adams.
You bet.
And we move to agenda item 14, the Continuing Education Committee report. And I think we've done quite a bit of updates on where the continuing education, the large regulatory package is, and going out for public comment January. Is that anticipated? And so I think that we did a lot of continuing education work, and thanks to the committee, Dr. Adams, Dr. Daniels, and we kind of took a long exhale, maybe longer than we needed to. And so our last meeting for that committee was in January. So happy to see us meeting again coming up here within the month, or in about a month or so. And we have 3 main items that we will have on that agenda for that meeting to continue discussion and development. One is our basic life support for all licensees, and we're going to potentially reinstate the requirement for all licensees to maintain BLS certification that includes cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, as a condition of licensure and active status. And currently, staff's gathering information regarding possible accommodations for individuals with temporary or permanent disabilities. And we're also updating the regulatory text to, proposed regulatory text to allow for modern course delivery methods. So that includes online CPR renewal, self-paced learning, and hands-on skills sessions for either with a BLS instructor or in a simulation station, or also known as a voice-activated mannequin. So that's kind of the trend. The other new trend is to update these, and I want to say AHA without misspeaking, but I think that one of the trends is to also have the availability to kind of take this into more edible little pieces and have those renewals rely on smaller portions of updated CE like every 3 months. So you do a little bit every quarter and you maintain your certification that way. So we'll have to look at if that's something else we have to address with our language. The second thing we will discuss is the CE exemptions and reduction of requirements. And we were discussing the regulatory proposal to exempt or reduce the CE requirements for licensees who are affected adversely by a natural disaster or a state or federal declared state of emergency. And staff is preparing any other additional hardships that may potentially qualify for an exemption. Ms. Walker, what would be an example for us?
Mainly trying to clean up some of the sometimes there's health related concerns or things that come up, or just different things where it's like we ideally could have a little bit more flexibility in language to be able to address things on a case by case basis. So we're doing a kind of a review of what some of the other boards have as far as being able to deal with circumstances as they arise, so that we can be able to really grant either, whether it's an exemption or an extension. Because in some cases, it's not that they need to be exempt, but if something, if you wait till the last minute, something happens, your license is about to expire, and it's, are there circumstances where it may be appropriate for us to be able to grant a 30-day extension for them to be able to complete the CE, and under what circumstances? We're putting some more language together around that for a discussion on whether or not to proceed, but just to provide additional flexibility really on licensees who just face hardships that they come up, and how do we handle those? Or a lot of things that'll come up is a licensee is going through surgery, and it's like, do they need to place the license in inactive status and come back, or can they renew and get to active status?
Or get an extension?
Yeah.
Or like I got COVID.
True.
Something like that. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And the third agenda item that we'll have at that committee meeting will be the again, I think we discussed this earlier, but the appeal process for denied continuing education course and provider applications. And staff will again present us with some potential options and potential language for discussion there. And that's, I'll take questions. We're glad to see us coming back, and my committee, should I chair one next year, will not be the lowest number of meetings. I can promise that. That will be my personal goal, to make sure we meet more frequently.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did a lot of ground, I will say. CE committee covered a lot of ground in 2022, and so it was a much needed exhale, I think. Yes?
We'll talk about it in the meeting, but just to kind of let staff know, or just to throw it out there. So as far as I know, I had brought up the disabilities with CPR and what are those ramifications. So the physicians with disabilities is actually pretty well researched, and they have guidelines, so you could look there.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't fully vetted that information yet, but that's a place to look. And so some ideas like are, one, limiting scope to having a sign on the door that says nobody in this facility is able to or performs CPR. It's another way around it. And another option, which we can talk about in the meeting, is if, say, the doctor can't perform it due to a disability, that there's somebody in the office when that doctor is there that is certified and able to perform it. So there's just kind of 3 options off the top of my head as far as what I've been looking into that we can discuss later in the meeting.
Nice.
So.
And could you describe physicians with disabilities? I'm not familiar.
Well, they have, there's a lot of research on it and there's guidelines. So say, a physician has, a hand problem, they are prohibited, their scope is limited from performing surgery. So whatever, the physician has a disability and their scope is limited based on that disability.
Okay.
So
it's subject matter, not a group? Like
correct.
there's a
Yeah,
physicians
yeah.
with, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, thank you.
So,
for that.
there's some options
Yeah.
out there as far as how to, because, say a chiropractor's just doing, not just, but nutrition consultations. They can have maybe potentially have a sign on their door saying, I don't perform, nobody in the office performs CPR, and that the sign is clear and to public access. So whoever's entering that building has that understanding. So there's some
Very well.
options out there, I think.
Oh, very nice. Thank you. Any other discussion questions from the board? No. Hearing none, I'd open agenda item 14, the Continuing Education Committee report for public comment. Seeing and hearing none, we can move on to agenda item number 15. And review, discussion, and possible action regarding submission of comments on final draft of revised Council on Chiropractic Education Accreditation Standards and CCE Residency Program Accreditation Standards. And I'd ask Ms. Walker to give us an update there.
Sure. Just a little bit of background information on this one. So as you likely recall, last fall, the licensing committee did quite a bit of work around the CCE proposed revisions to the accreditation standards for the Doctor of Chiropractic degree program as well as the residency programs. Following the licensing committee's review, the board also discussed the matter, and we had submitted basically 3 public comments in response to that initial draft that they shared with us last year. Following that, they did come back. They made a few revisions to their standards. They didn't actually make any of the changes that we had specifically requested. So that's something for us to consider as we're looking at the curriculum regulations in the future, of maybe if there's a gap there, we can address it through our regulations. But they did make a number of additional changes to the DCP accreditation standards that we're going to discuss a little bit here today, but it's just mainly an opportunity for the board to discuss this final draft of revisions. They've got a second public comment period that's going through the end of the month. So just opening up this item for discussion, and if the board wants to offer any additional public comments in response to this final draft that they're circulating. Particularly, there was just a few that I wanted to note before I turn it over for the board for discussion. Of note, for me, looking through the document itself, on page 2, really just wanted to emphasize it's in line with some of the discussion that the licensing committee has been having on curriculum and kind of the language within the act and how do we go from there. They've added on page 2, and then you'll see it throughout the document, when it comes to the program length with a minimum of 4,200 instructional hours, they've added or equivalent following approval under the terms and conditions of CCE Policy 1 program changes. So that equivalent kind of really opens the door for additional flexibility. It's kind of the same kind of mechanism we were looking at for our regulations. We just have to define what equivalent means, whereas they don't necessarily have to do that. But just wanted to note that change. Also liked to see that throughout the document, where it was initially talking about areas of concerns, they've replaced that word concerns with deficiencies, which I like. That provides better clarity, especially to me when I'm reviewing the document, because concern, where do you go with that? Deficiency is much clearer. Let's see. I liked on page 20, they had added that it be an expectation that the faculty is engaged in research and scholarship. Before it was just talking about, having them be engaged in that, but having, that emphasis on an expectation that that's what's occurring, I think it's really good for public safety. And there's a few others I wanted. They added on page 22 where they added a section for academic support. I think that was it's also good and likely in line with what we ultimately need to see for public protection, but then also for recognizing the unique needs of students. So right there in the middle of page 22, they've got academic support where that program's monitoring each student's progress and implementing policies and procedures that dictate active interventions based upon the student's needs. Page 25 may be helpful for the board as we're working on our curriculum regulations, because I saw in there where they added 1,000 hours. Students must complete a minimum of 1,000 instructional hours in a patient care setting. Because there was, with the curriculum regulations that we had, we have numbers in our regulations. They didn't have a lot of numbers. Now we're starting to see a few more numbers. So that could be helpful and informative for us, especially if we want to reflect some of these numbers when we get to our regulations. I think I had all I was going to mention here. Yeah, because then there's just the increased emphasis on research and scholarship. So overall, I didn't have any concerns with the proposed changes. I think some of them are good. And just wanted to turn it over for the board to entertain a discussion of the document and whether to submit any additional public comments. Also wanted to just to note and emphasize that the completion of this document and CCE's potential approval at their January 2024 meeting is going to be driving a lot of our timeline for our curriculum regulations, along with the board's own occupational analysis of the chiropractic profession that we're currently working on. So those two documents really go hand in hand and are going to help us move forward with our curriculum ourselves. So with that, I'd like to turn it back over to the board for a discussion.
Thank you. Any comments, discussion from the board members?
I would just add, having attended the FCLB and hearing Craig Little talk about a lot of this stuff and seeing it here, and some of the ideas of what they're talking about. For example, I can see now why they would say 1,000 hours, right? Which is about a fourth of the your fourth kind of academic year of chiropractic, which is the clinical side of things. When he talked about in his presentation the possibility of moving that to actually being in approved offices where the graduate would be in a real life setting, kind of like a preceptorship almost, like in the clinic, but being evaluated regularly and overseen by the doctor, that's been pre-approved, according to the, CCE kind of internship program, which I think it's the big takeaway I got from that presentation was that they're just moving more to the modern level of how education is now, focusing on the competency base, but also thinking in terms of the cost. He reiterated multiple times that the success of students is not necessarily the hours that they're sitting in a seat. It's about their ability to learn these competencies at a rate that they can. Some are going to be faster, others in other areas, and that as they do that they can move to the next level and progress. But also the fact that costs are becoming a huge, huge hurdle for chiropractic students. Coming out of school, he statistically talked about that the average is 250, which means 50% are below that and 50% are above that. And when you think about coming out of school with that kind of debt, and if there's ways that we can maintain those standards and yet decrease that debt burden, which, we're hearing all the time on the news about student debt and forgiveness and the challenge that is for a lot of people to even get an education because of the cost of education. And chiropractic school is no different than a lot of those issues that we're hearing about. So I like what the direction that they're going in that regard. And since we already kind of have in our regs that a person has to graduate from a CC accredited school, as long as they're maintaining those standards and we can assure that they're maintaining those standards, then it's probably a good direction to be going. I have nothing else. I know you got lots of comments, right?
I don't have a lot of comments, I have a few comments. So, a couple things, if we start with, on page 4, so the 4,200 hours, and, there was a push behind the scenes to get that equivalent, which is what we were gonna try and leverage off of as well. And then it says, the terms and conditions in CCE Policy 1 program changes, and I don't know, Ms. Walker, if you found the definition there, but when I read it, I didn't find it, so I've reached out to Dr. Little already. I haven't heard back on clarification on if they have that definition and what that looks like, what that means. Also, the change they've dropped the AATP track, and so now there's the 3 tracks of a bachelorette degree or 90 semester units of a grade point of 3 to 4 or 2.75 to 2.99. But if you look at it, it says including the basic sciences. So there is a general shift of moving away from requiring the basic sciences from CCE. So it's a consideration that California wants to look at as far as when considering the uniqueness of our stakeholders and the size of our state. And so I started a document comparing what they have listed as far as the requirements for the curriculum. And like one of the things that is missing is mental health. So that's why I think it's important for California to really look at, do they just want CCE or do they want CCE and some uniqueness to California, because mental health is a big concern in California, and I know that's the governor's concern as well. And so if it's not required, not listed in CCE, and there's doctors or students that are applying, is California okay with that? So, I can give this to you guys. Embryology is not included. Well, you need to know how the notochord developed because it specifically relates to spondylolisthesis and gait and back pain, et cetera. So I just want to point out, the document is great, but California may want to be more specific about what California wants, especially with that bill as far as licensees in California giving the warm handoff for victims of abuse, yet there's no required training in psychology. Dermatology is another one that's not included. We touch the skin and we look at the skin, and our stakeholders see us more than they see their regular doctor. And there's a paper done by Dr. Michael Ramachandran, who's here, on skin lesions and the role the chiropractor plays in protecting the public as far as getting them to see their primary care doctor when they see something suspicious. So not saying that any of it is not great, it's just there's some considerations as far as the specificity of California and the stakeholders. So that's just, is something that, we can discuss, more. Plus I was discussing, with here, about 20% of their students are that AATP, so how is that really going to impact as far as the admissions process, just in general. With the addition of the bachelorette degree, I've been in talks with some people, the concept of being competitive with, there's DPT programs now that are 2 years. So if you have a bachelor degree, you can do a DPT in 2 years. And so it's potentially in the future a path for chiropractic. If you have that bachelor degree, is there a program that's going to be designed down the future that is that quality? So there's to me, some nuances in those changes and what that can mean moving forward. They also didn't really define the 1,000 hours as, I think it was a patient clinical care setting. And I know it's a question for one of the deans. Well, what does that mean? Is that observation or is that hands-on? So they already, from seeing the document, feel like they need some more clarification just on what does that mean. And I believe here, for example, they already have 1,170 clinical hours, so they're already above that. Also, they already have in place the academic support, so it's great that it says it. But even if they don't have those AATP students, they already have, if you look at their mechanisms and their spreadsheets and stuff, they already are tracking those students, and they're already on top of capturing the ones that say are starting to fall behind, and they're reaching out. So they're really already, at least for here, very proactive in that. And the requirements for eligibility, I just want to also just food for thought, highlight it's 4,200 instructional hours, and the curriculum includes but is not limited to. So again, California wants to, I think about that just because what they've listed here may not be a full picture of what California wants. It's different than those smaller states or what the stakeholders expect or their demographics. So it includes, but it says not limited to. So if California wanted, you can have more than that. You have to consider the ramifications of that, but I just kind of want to point that out. Plus they also talk about that each area, each program may have differences in their mission and the strategies that they adopt. So each program may have a different mission, and California may have a different mission or a different perspective, and CCE recognizes that. So it's like, here are the guidelines, but I just want to point out, the state still can put in what they want of what is going to be beneficial for their stakeholders. So those were, I think, most of my comments on that. Oh, and there's also in our regs or the act, it said geriatrics, and it says obstetrics, gynecology, and pediatrics, and in the new CCE it says special population. So those to me can fall under that, but I think we just need to know that that means that, and that we can then clarify that in the language in ours, so that we're not violating our act, but then we're including those special populations, and we can define special populations that then include geriatric, obstetrics. So we're not violating that, and then we're further defining it through the regulations. So I think that was all I had to say.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other discussion? I kind of appreciate the attempt to raise the admission standards. I think that improving the quality of the student that enters Chiro school has downstream effects to public protection when they become licensees. So regarding this agenda item and the requested action for a motion, are we going to have the availability to re-ask the questions that were not necessarily responded to or last time, or are we gonna develop, can we develop, to submit what the deadline is?
The deadline is the end of the month, so we can request and certainly follow up on the ones that we previously submitted and just get responses so we can report back to the board. And there's a few other great comments that have come up. We can either relay those or we can just kind of take that and recognize that information and plan to incorporate it in our own regulations, kind of whichever path you're more comfortable with.
Well, I think for this agenda item, I think we were concerned with what, are we going to submit additional comments?
It's just, it's providing it for the opportunity. The board doesn't have to submit any additional comments on it. It's just they are conducting an open public comment period. It's the last one before they consider the text in January. So we can submit something, or we can just let it pass through in January and then work on our own regs.
I think there were a lot of really insightful comments made. I would, and I'm open to hearing from the rest of the board, but if we have the ability to kind of go back and make those, succinct enough to put as comments to CCE, I think as the largest state association in the nation, we should comment.
Okay.
And I think there was a lot of valuable comments here. Is there any thoughts on that? Is everyone okay with that?
I agree. I think also, I don't know that, I don't get the impression from hearing Craig talk at the FCLB that this is like a hard stop at October 31st. I got a feeling that I'm sure that if we're going to have him in person in January, that there's going to be an opportunity for us to also give some, obviously we should get some suggestions now as they are, but I could be mistaken on that, but I would think they're going to, be working through some of this stuff. You might have some other insight on that. I don't know, but
Yeah,
I know it's been a process for them. This isn't something they just did, real recent. This has been in the works for a while.
I guess my question would be then, for you and for Dr. Daniels, would you be open to working with staff to develop those talking points as related to comments to CCE? We'd have to do it before the 30th.
31st.
I just think not knowing, I think we can presume that they'd probably let us have some input, but officially commenting on it during the comment period is really what we want to do. That's the most effective way to go on record.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I lean more with the latter portion of what Ms. Walker said as far as just kind of, taking this outline and then just really molding it for what's important for California, and not so much that because this is going, as Dr. Adams is saying, this is going to continue to change and morph as the world turns, so to speak. And so I'm happy to, and I agree, I'm happy to help staff kind of just at least make those comments formal. At the same time, at least in the licensing committee's thoughts is, just we can take this information as guideposts to, okay, what really is not there that's important to California. And that it's not an all or nothing. It's not like, we want CCE there, they're amazing, right? And we want them. Additionally, California may have different requirements. Like, you talk about mental health, and you talk about dermatology, and you talk about the number, right? They're not saying numbers, and here they give a number, but again, that number is not clearly defined. At least it's not defined for when a particular school looked at it. So, it's taking this information and utilizing it. But I'm happy to assist in any way I can as far as making a formal comment. And then, Dr. Paris, I just want to address, I think I'm in total agreement of their admissions track, the changes with the bachelor degree, just because it is in line more with physical therapy and stuff. But just a side note, again, because this is dealing with numbers and metrics, and how do we evaluate a student or who's going to be a great physician, and a grade point average does not decide a great physician. And I was just curious, and I had access to some of the numbers, and the board pass rate between the AATP students that came in on a lower track that needed support, and then the higher grade point average, say the regular, they weren't that far off. So it just reiterates, it goes both ways with numbers, that a low GPA does not necessitate, at a particular point in a student's career, does not necessitate an insufficient doctor, or they could actually be amazing. So I just wanted to make a comment. When I looked at the numbers, their passing rate was quite similar, so it didn't matter what grade they came in on. So.
Well, to your point, there was some pushback actually at the FCLB meeting, that Craig Little and a gentleman from one of the boards went back and forth about that, and he said, listen, statistically, this is what happens. I mean, people that have this, people that have this, the people that have this, they perform equally well.
Yes.
That's statistically what it was, because the one person's like, I think they're from the state that has required you to have a bachelor's degree, and they were like, well, we know, this is why we do this, because it has to higher level. And he says, I get that. That's what your state's decided on. He goes, but statistically, if somebody has 90 hours and they have a GPA at 2.0, they've got their 90 hours, and then they do these health sciences, they perform as well as the person that comes in with, so that's what he was pointing out, was that why they had those tiers.
Well, right, and it doesn't say, just because I have a 3.0, does that give them the right not to take the basic sciences? Like, how does a grade point average equate to not having to do the basic sciences? I asked for clarification, I haven't received it yet. Yeah, but to your point, they statistically were just so close in alignment that, just because you have a lower grade point average does not make you, your pass rate, or as a physician, less than.
I got the impression from hearing him talk was that the schools do a good enough job that those basic sciences, I mean, again, just from what I gleaned from that the job of the DCP is to prepare that person to have the minimum requirements to be a doctor, in a sense, right? To get their national boards and to go on and to pass these other competencies or checkpoints, hallmarks, if you will, along the way. And I think that's what they're really driving at, is that, now you have all this data that shows these people, all these different levels come in, and then they graduate, and then they have those longitudinal studies that show that they become good doctors that have all these different backgrounds coming in. And so I look at it and I think, coming out of the school I was at, getting a bachelor's at BYU, I mean, the anatomy that I had to take at BYU was way more than what I had to have at chiropractic school. So anatomy at chiropractic school was easy. Some people that didn't have any of that, they had a difficult time, but they still got it.
Well, so this is and there's, just to clarify, there's a difference between what they're saying with GPA, and there's a difference between whether basic sciences are needed before you enter. And to your point, from another school, from somebody who's very much educated in education, is not necessarily a fan of dropping basic sciences for the requirement. To your point, it was easy for you because you had what we call a silo. You had a silo to put that information in. And as a rapid, as a program that is accelerated and very fast, if you don't have those silos and you haven't seen that word before, you can have more of a difficult time. So there's a difference between the GPA, and there's a difference between recognizing the basic sciences as far as if they're required or not. And then just in line with the bachelor degree, I think, the studies and the stats that I've seen, it just because you have a bachelor degree doesn't mean that you make a better doctor. But what it says and what's accepted currently in the world is that, it puts it more in line with the medical education, so it sort of alleviates some of that perception. And it also basically says that you can withstand some sort of rigor. That when you've talked to educators, they don't look at a bachelor degree like, oh, this is a better human being that's going to be a better doctor. It just means to them, okay, you can withstand some sort of rigor and you can finish something. And in our case, with our profession kind of being discriminated against or, not looked upon as equal, when you have that addition of that bachelor degree, I think, that's what it's doing, but it doesn't take away from students with a lesser, only 90 units, that they can't be a great doctor.
I think that's an excellent point, that someone that's had a 3.0 or above and has a bachelor's degree has, in many cases, shown that they can handle it, that they have a good basis for study skills and those types of things that are going to give them a higher degree of success taking on a graduate level program. Whereas a person with a 2.0, having them do the basic sciences is going to give them a leg up when they do get those refresher. It's almost going to be like building on what they already have. I think that's what they're saying, is that their ability to have success, because what did Craig say is that, the chiropractic schools have to be careful because they have to have a certain percentage of success rate in students, or they gotta get rid of them.
Right.
Because you can't have a certain percentage of your school not passing.
Well, as like one of the deans say, they're already supporting their students. They already are really watching it. And, one of the phrases from one of the deans is, if you accept a student, you need to support that student.
Yeah.
And so that's the model that, the school is already, moving from.
Yeah. I think for me, it comes back to an issue of trust, right? If we trust CCE, that they're doing the data crunching, that they're doing these things, that we have to decide, because it may be that what we're going to get stuck with is that if we do have kind of, quote, a hybrid type situation in California, then it defeats the purpose, because we can say we have these requirements, but we may lose our schools, or we may just stop having people want to come to California because we're still keeping it at a level where other states are saying, hey, we trust CCE. That's the danger that we run into, right?
Well,
If we say we got to be here.
Not necessarily. I mean, if you're talking about certain requirements that are to meet your stakeholders, and if you're talking about, being exposed to, if we just take psychology and dermatology, okay, well, maybe a student will go someplace else because there's 2 less classes. But I still think California needs to consider who their population is and kind of not worry. I mean, you want to consider it, but if we're basing our decision just because we don't want to lose a school, and that may not, I'm not saying it is, I'm just saying we need to consider it, the bigger picture. If that's not in the best interest of California, then, other educators say, California's a unique state. You absolutely may want to consider that you have, not that you're deviating that much from it, but you may want to consider what is in the best interest of your population. Plus, we don't know where CCE is going to go in 20 years. So, we've been saying, well, where is it going to be in 20 years? We don't know. Like, we know Miss Walker as our EO, but we don't know that next step. We don't know where that's going to go. And so I just caution California to be mindful.
All great
and
points.
If that is the decision, then that's the decision. But to not consider it because it's easier to not consider it, I think is erroneous or a mistake.
Yeah, I think you make the point here that our role is to make thoughtful and considerate decisions. And so there's no stone unturned, I think, when we're making decisions from this board. I am looking forward, I hope that Dr. Little can attend our meeting I will, if it meets with approval from the rest of the board, I will ask that we add extra time for that presentation and Q&A, and we may be able to, you know, let him know kind of what some of the, you know, let him prepare for some of the questions that we might have and be able to ask him here. And I would say to the public and to our stakeholders, I don't feel like we've had either side of that discussion come to us directly, and so I would encourage them to come attend those meetings and voice their concerns, whether they think we Californians have special needs, or they think that our stakeholders are unique in some way in the education needs, or they align with what CE is doing, or they have issues or questions or concerns there. I think what's really important is that we do our best to continue to do our outreach and hopefully influence them to come before us so we can help us work through this for the regulation needs.
Yeah, and just, I mean, the feedback that I've gotten so far is really not so much in the curriculum. That's not the problem. They're doing it. They don't have a problem you know, they see the value, they're doing it. The challenges, at least as far as what I've heard, is really more, and the attendance rate is a really big one. So it's really just kind of dealing with some of those issues. That's at least the feedback that I've gotten. That is a challenge for them, not so much the 250 you know, visits. They say, you know, we get it done by 8th try, 98% do. It's just not a problem. They just stop counting after, you know, most of them do more than that. That's not the issue. But I know attendance is a big one, and ours is 90%. And there is some good literature on, like I said, the downside of mandatory percentages for attendance. And there's, you know, one school is being really creative that they have, you know, they don't log attendance, but they put the focus into within the class, there's the hot seat. So you need to have completed so many hot seat sort of exposures. And so they're getting the attendance, but they're just not checking it off. And they're really getting the students to engage and want to show up. And like I said, there's some good literature on it fosters a better relationship with the student when you take out that mandatory attendance. So I'm just using that as an example. I know that that is a challenge, and it really puts their resources in an area that is not student focused.
I would suggest too, if we can, that we, maybe if we can direct staff to see if we can get help with the outreach and awareness that we are having these discussions and that these are, you know, important meeting dates other than our usual channels of, you know, publicity, maybe reaching out to those college presidents, key stakeholders, some of the deans at all of the schools, and, you know, request their feedback and, you know, request their input. Yeah, it's a really multi-layered, complicated. There's a lot of pitfalls and a lot of opportunities in there, I think, and I'm happy that you're leading the committee that's taking it on. You've done a great job really digging out the details, even for us here.
Not to prolong it, I'm just curious, because that what you just said there kind of put a little light on in my head. So what is their suggestion about it? I mean, is that kind of their suggestion, that, or is that's one suggestion,
Which
the hot
part?
seat idea for attendance? If it's not so much curriculum and it's more, you know, some of these other more prescriptive, you know,
Yes,
restrictions,
that's
right?
my understanding.
Then what's their workaround? What's their suggestion?
So with one school,
I mean, obviously, we'd love to hear from them, but what do
yeah,
they say?
I mean, with one school, you know, she just gave me the hot seat as an example as far as engagement. And so the teacher is responsible for interacting with the student, and, you know, if there's a problem, then they're not showing up repeatedly, and they miss, say, for this one school, they use this hot seat thing, where that student has to engage in a clinical, you know, case, and it's like a round robin, right? You have to be there for those. So that's what one school is doing, and they find that it's very successful, and if someone's not showing up, but they're passing all their metrics, you know, they're just, that's not their concern. They're like, well, they've demonstrated that they can do their job and what they've been asked to do, because students are different. Some people, you know, learn much faster. So there's, you know, we can get them here, but they are watching attendance. It's just, you know, I just know that as soon as one person drops off a class and they go below that 10%, they're supposed to drop them from that class. That then requires staff of constant monitoring, then they have to contact that student. You know, so it's really my understanding a lot of the problem is the overly prescriptive details that they are supposed to be logging. And, you know, I think if we can get the schools to come and talk, and you start talking to them, they're doing a great job. You know what I mean? Like, they are monitoring this because you know, that it's in their best interest as well, is to have successful students that are graduating. So, but when you look in the literature, there is a big conversation about attendance, and it's occurring in the medical community. And, you know, this one author will get the paper, you know, talked about, I thought this was the best thing, and then we ran the stats after, and it was terrible. And, you know, the students were angry about it. They just showed up. They were not engaged, versus, you know, showing up and having conversations and more around clinic. I mean, that's the other, is that, you know, some people are fast tracking. So if a class is 15 units or 15 weeks, but they get their credits done for the classes that you can do online at your own pace, if you finish that early and you pass those metrics, you can go to the clinic and start observing and right after that. So you're getting much more exposure much sooner on of those observational skills. So there's just, you know, it's, you know, I don't know, I'm, you know, very naive about the whole thing. There's a lot of conversation about, you know, numbers versus, you know, no numbers. And then how do you measure it? And so, like, you know, this paper's on McNamara fallacy, which talks about the Vietnam War in particular, and how they were measuring that we were being successful because of the body count. And so now it's known as this fallacy, and it's brought into education as far as that balance between don't get lost in the numbers, but you need a way to assess competency-based education. So it gets very complicated, but just food for thought that our overly prescriptive rights with certain things really may not, the literature shows, it's probably not the best thing anyways, and it is really hindering the schools.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it seems to me, at least the example, not to stay on this one example, I think maybe if we were to have all the colleges tell us what the main issue is, they probably all have a different issue, and they probably all have to do with the act or our regulations. But I think, like, the oversight to what you mentioned, you know, about the students that fall below, like, as part of the CCE accreditation process, that's what we rely on them for, is to make sure
Right.
that, you know, that during the accreditation process, they have a plan in place and they can demonstrate students, you know, meeting the milestones, and then also, you know, the meta competencies and the objectives and the milestones underneath those, but then also if there's a need for remediation, that there's a plan in place, and the students who haven't met that, they're the ones that can go in, physically go in, look at the charts, look in their, you know, patient, you know, the student files, et cetera, and look for those efforts, those remediation efforts, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. It's a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
I would take some guidance, but I think if we entertain a motion here to incorporate the discussion into comments and feedback to CCE prior to during the public comment submission period on behalf of the board, as described, as discussed, and then also reiterate our 3 previous question comments.
I'll second that.
Is that good?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a first and we have a second.
That sounds like a pretty good motion.
Okay. And again, is there any further discussion on the board regarding that motion? Hearing none, Let me open that agenda item 15 and that motion for public comment. Seeing and hearing none. Mr. Sweet, would you please call the roll for the vote on the motion?
Dr. Paris?
Yes.
Dr. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. Sweet, yes. Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Dr. Daniels?
Yes.
Motion passes. And before I move off of agenda item 15, Ms. Walker, was there anything else we needed or any other discussion under this agenda item?
No, I appreciate the discussion today, and then I will work with Dr. Daniels to synthesize some of our points so that we can get that submission done by the end of the month, but I think we're set.
Okay, perfect. And we'll reach out and add a little bit of time to the next meeting agenda unless there's an objection to have Dr. Little here and we can directly ask some of the questions and have some discussion.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, moving to agenda item number 16. We're almost there. Nomination of candidates for the 2024 board officer positions. And we have Mr. Anthony Payne here.
Thank you, Chair.
And so please take over.
All right, so just a little bit of background. Today, the goal is to get nominations, not to actually vote on those nominations. That will be done in the January meeting. Process for this board is I'll go down alphabetically. The chair will go last, and I will do chair, vice chair, and then secretary. And if somebody happens to nominate a fellow member, I will ask them if they are willing to accept that nomination. All right, any questions? All right, so for chair, Vice Chair Adams, do you have any nominations?
Yes, I nominate Dr. David Paris to be in the chair position.
Thank you.
Dr. Parrish, you
I
would
would
accept?
accept the nomination.
All right, Member Cruz, do you have any nominations for president?
Oh, Dr. Paris. No, so no. No addition.
And Member Daniels?
No additional.
And Mr. Sweet?
Nothing additional.
Chair Paris? You don't have any additional?
No additional.
Okay, very good. For vice chair, Vice Chair Adams, do you have any nominations?
I would like to continue that position, so I would nominate myself.
Member Cruz?
No additions.
Additions? Member Daniels?
No additions.
Secretary Sweet?
No other nomination.
All right, very good. And last, for secretary, Vice Chair Adams. Any nominations? I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped you.
Yeah, I would just
Chair?
say I would second Dr.
Yeah, no
Adams'
additional.
nomination. Yeah, no additional.
Okay, my apologies. Okay, now we'll go to secretary. Vice Chair Adams. Any
I have no nominations.
nominations? Member Cruz, any nominations for secretary?
No nominations.
Member Daniels?
I would like to nominate Ms. Cruz for secretary.
Okay, very good. Ms. Cruz, do you accept?
Accept nomination.
Okay. Secretary Sweet?
No other nomination.
No other nominations? And Chair?
And no other nomination.
Okay. Thank you. So we have our nominees, which will be voted on the January meeting. Thank you.
Yeah. And any other discussion, questions about process, anything we just did? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Payne. I would open agenda item 16, nomination of candidates for 2024 board officer positions for public comment. Seeing and hearing none. Moving to agenda item number 17, scheduling of the 2024 quarterly board meetings. And I believe, Ms. Walker, are you going to facilitate this for us?
I certainly can. For this agenda item, we've got some staff suggestions there, and we'll go in order. We could probably start with, if the board is okay with just the proposed structure of doing a January meeting via teleconference, followed by an April meeting, Northern California, 2-day meeting, so that we can do it like this format with regular business followed by petitioners. Then another 1-day teleconference in July, followed by another in-person 2-day meeting in Southern California with regular business and petitioners. Of course, tentative, if we don't have enough petitions to hear, we can slice a date off there. So is the board concurrent at least with that kind of structure, and then we can start picking dates? Okay. As far as the January board meeting, we have to hold it in January just so we can elect officers. The preference is to be able to hold it closer to the end of the month so we can have a more thorough budget discussion when the governor's budget is released in kind of early January. So staff was recommending that the board select one date that may work between January 22nd and the 31st. And then I was hearing some conflicts. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just curious, is that why I mean, I know it's not set in stone, is that why the recommendation is always at the end of the month for all the meetings, or?
We had just kind of wanted to space them out kind of evenly, but it's totally, if those dates don't work, we're very flexible
Okay,
on
gotcha.
what we picked today.
I didn't know if there was a staff reason, or, I mean, a hard.
Nope, they're not hard. It was just more to kind of space them out and narrow down the range of dates everyone was flipping through calendars.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah,
Can we just, is it okay if I jump in for a second?
go ahead.
So can we maybe see if anyone has any conflicts just up front for January, any dates? I know Dr. Adams, you have.
Yeah, I do. For January 18th to the 21st. So I could do, and I think Dr. Daniels, you're looking for a Wednesday, correct? You would
Fridays.
prefer to do.
I prefer Fridays, but I'll navigate a Wednesday. Tuesday, Thursdays are
Wednesday.
a little overwhelming.
If we do a weekday, a Wednesday preference?
Wednesday or Friday is
Mr.
easier. I
Sweet?
don't know about-
I mean, I can make either work. Friday's probably preferable.
Friday would be preference?
Yeah, Friday would be preference for me.
Friday preference, okay.
26th?
I have a
got a
conflict.
conflict, yeah.
ACA's annual Engage in DC is that kind of the end of that week and through the weekend. What about the Friday, is Friday okay for you too?
You know, I'm tied up from the 18th to the 21st.
Yeah. How about the 12th? Is that too far in advance?
Too close.
A week before, a week
Or is it-
after.
Too early, I think. Is that too early?
No, it's not too early. We can do that. There might be a limited discussion on the budget, but that's okay because we're having those at the Government Public Affairs Committee meetings as well. So I was going to recommend either the 12th, Friday the 12th, Wednesday the 17th, or Wednesday the 31st. So whichever of those 3 days sounds good.
So what were the 3 dates?
Friday the 12th, Wednesday the 17th, or Wednesday the 31st.
Dr. Daniels, were Fridays okay for you? It was
Fridays
just-
were the preferred.
Yeah.
Okay, so Friday preference, Friday
Mhm.
preference,
And
Friday
Friday.
preference.
Yeah.
You can do Friday the 12th?
I can.
Okay.
Yeah, that's far enough out.
Okay.
Can we, do we need a vote? This is too easy.
I don't
jinx
think
it.
we need a
You don't need a
vote.
vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Friday the 12th it is.
So then, so we'll have Friday, January 12th.
And that'll be a day, right?
Just a one-day WebEx meeting.
No petitioners on that date, right?
No, just regular business,
Just
and we'll
business.
have our
So we would likely be
presentation.
done, we'd likely be done by 2:00?
Well, we've got Dr. Paris's request for all the presentations, so it's probably going to be like a 9 to 3.
Just one. I mean, we're inviting everybody to come, of course, but, you know, just one on the agenda. no
Yeah.
Public comment. Would be nice.
Okay, one down.
Okay. April,
So then for April, we're requesting a 2-day window. So I don't know if you want to do Thursday, Fridays, or work. I would recommend the consecutive days would just make it easiest for travel and for coordination of a meeting. So you could do
Well,
Thursday,
you guys like
Fridays.
it.
or-
You guys as staff, you guys prefer the end of the week though, don't you? So
Um,
you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to prep?
Um, generally, it works well. We're really flexible, especially as we're looking that far out. The only ones that are sometimes tricky for us is like a Monday board meeting, just because it's hard to come off the weekend and then go into a full board meeting. Monday committee meetings are very easy to do. 'cause
You
they're
guys
short.
prefer to do at least one of the days of Friday, right? Because that works best with your,
Yeah, I mean, Thursday, Friday is fine with me.
and that would be Sacramento. Are we gonna be at the board office? or
We
down?
talked about visiting Palmer potentially, so we could do one in San Jose instead of Sacramento, because
Might be our last opportunity to
that
Yeah,
probably
I
have a
would
think
be-
board meeting
San
at the
Jose.
college.
No, I didn't know that's.
25,
Okay.
26?
Which
So Palmer
days?
West over Life West, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get Life West the next time around, just
Palmer
because
will be
Palmer's
closed.
closing.
I could,
And
I
so-
could put in the 25, 26, if that, the Friday preference help
Yeah,
everyone.
I can do that.
Larry, Dr. Adams, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm just trying to think, because I'm gonna be at a conference the following week. That'd be two back-to-back weeks of Thursday, Fridays. Is the 18th or 19th totally out?
I can do that.
Is that out of the question for anybody else?
I can make it work.
I can make both, either work.
Yeah. Mr. Sweet.
It's my wife's birthday on the
It's not his
19th,
fave.
but
Taxes,
she'll
taxes.
She's gonna come- she's
sacrifice.
gonna come with
She
a sac-
shares the
Come with
sacrifice.
a
What's that now? Your wife, what? What was that?
Oh, no, it's okay. Her birthday is on the 19th. Well, it's okay. Remember we did Valentine's Day? We did Valentine's Day right after a meeting one year.
I don't know. if
I can do
Mr.
18,
Sweet can
19.
do
I
18.
I don't want-
can make it work, but, yeah, I mean, 24, 25 works better, but either, I mean, I can make it work.
Are you sure?
25, 26, you mean,
Oh,
the Thursday,
25,
Friday?
26,
Okay.
sorry.
I'm open to either, so,
I'm open to either, and I think Ms. Cruz is open to either,
Yep.
so it's between you two.
That's fine, I can make it work.
Hashtag
For the 18th, 19th?
first, or the
25.
20.
That's not too much of a hard,
Oh, I can do it.
So, are
And-
we decided?
So we'll do April 18th to 19th, San Jose,
and potentially
potentially.
at Palmer West.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
So then, moving to July, that's gonna be another one-day teleconference. We're really flexible on the dates, but I don't know if you wanna do, a Friday again, either the 19th or the 26th.
I'm sensing Fridays are, is there any objection
There's
to?
one,
it's
that one Friday there, I can't do, let me just get.
Probably not the 5th, right? That would be too early in the month, but that's the
Yeah,
4th.
plus with the July 4th.
Yeah,
I-
July 4th weekend.
I can't do the 12th. I could do the 19th or the 26th.
Either of those work for me.
we're into July now,
Yeah.
trying to do a Friday.
Mhm.
That's so far out there, I can do whatever the board wants to do.
So what are we looking at, the 19th or the 26th?
I can do the
Is
5th,
that
the
right?
19th, or the 26th.
Yeah. 19th or the 26th.
I can do
Staff
both of those.
preference on the 19th or the 26th?
Not on those two, just not the 5th.
I'm good with it. Is the general consensus either or? Because I
Yeah.
mean, if I had a preference, I'd say the 19th.
That's fine with me.
Fine.
So we'll do Friday, July 19th, and then we just need to pick one more in October. This would be a 2-day in Southern California, and we'd be looking at either potentially returning here, or we've done them in the past in San Diego as well, so we can look at locations. But But that could be the 17th and 18th, or the 24th and 25th.
Is the determining factor for 2 days typically have to be if we have petitioners? Because I know we had a 2-day in April, but we switched it to a 1-day.
It's because we didn't have petitioners.
We didn't have petitioners. Is
Mhm.
there a potential for that to happen?
Yes, yeah, it's to tentatively plan for the 2 days, so that if we have sufficient petitioners to be able to have a second day, because we've tried to put them all in one day and it doesn't work very well, and we usually, you pay the bill for the ALJ based on the day anyway, so you want to have as many petitions as possible on the calendar.
So what is typically a go, no-go date to know if there's going to be a petitioner or not? I mean, is it,
Generally 45 days out, we would
okay,
know.
so we should know within 45 days, because that would be huge help for me.
Yeah, yes,
Because
we
in
know.
scheduling, when I schedule out, I'm
Mhm.
usually scheduling, out. If I can have ideally 30-day, 45
Easily,
days is
yeah.
great. If I can get 45 days, that's perfect.
Yeah,
If-
we
if
can,
it-
we can get at
if
least
there's gonna be a
45 to 60 days of
cancellation.
notice, because we know which petitions are being received, and then, we assess them if they've met all the requirements, we can get them heard, but it's entirely reasonable that if we haven't received it 60 days out from a meeting, we're not even going to be contacting OAH to make the hearing, so we can communicate that down to the board and
Yeah, that'd be
and
great.
shave
because
off
then
the-
we
shave
off the
fill
Thursday,
our
just-
Yeah,
schedule.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that would be my preference, if we can make sure that that's a priority, that,
Mhm.
that we get that.
And if we
Notification.
do make that move, is the preference that we eliminate the Thursday and just keep Friday? Like, say we've scheduled for 2, we'll just make it on the Friday.
Well,
Okay.
for me,
Yeah.
I'd rather keep the Thursday, but that's just because I have that's usually my day off, and so I don't miss patients, but,
Okay.
I'm willing to,
Are you willing to sacrifice,
yeah, I'll
Dr.
take it
Adams?
up the shorts.
Thank you. Okay, so I have
Set the
7/19 tele that's the July,
Yeah, so we just need
and we just need
October.
October.
October 17th and 18th, or 24th and 25th.
Fine with either one.
Yeah.
Slight preference for 24, 25, but I could do either.
Sounds good.
That leaves us a full 7 days to prep for Halloween. 24th, 25th,
Does that work?
any objections?
It's fine.
I know it's a long
Yeah, I'm
ways out.
just looking at it. Yeah, that should be fine. October 24th, 25th?
Yeah, it's Thursday, Friday again.
Great.
And can we vote on location right now?
I wouldn't recommend voting on the location,
Don't vote on it.
because then you're locked in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Make suggestions?
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Get prep- can we discuss
what are your
preference?
suggestions? Yeah, suggestions or preferences?
I think we vary the location year to year, maybe
Mhm.
go to San Diego
Okay.
as an option. But I think it went well when we were there before, if I
Mhm.
recall.
Yeah.
But I would also take input from the rest of the board.
Whatever.
So
My,
that,
my vote is North Hollywood.
North Hollywood. Yeah, me too. Stay with my folks.
so we're down
Okay.
for 24th, 25th?
Yes.
Do we need anything else?
Nope,
on that?
we've
Okay.
got what we
We
need.
did.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. So I'd open agenda item 17 for public comment, the schedule for the 2024 quarterly board meetings. Seeing and hearing none, I will move on to agenda item 18, future agenda items. And I would open this up for discussion by the board on any future agenda items. Hearing none?
Oh, sorry, I do.
Sorry,
I
yeah,
do.
please.
Sorry, no, navigating my lists here. I think we noticed a couple throughout. Is it in a specifically board meeting, not committee meeting, just to clarify?
Can-
I could be either.
It could be.
Yeah.
It could be
Be
either.
either.
Be
Okay,
either.
so we did mention kind of something around discussion around social media and guidance, whether it be in committee or at the board meeting level. I think we also brought up regulatory versus legislative process, kind of presentation, kind of just to give an understanding of timelines and board expectations. Somewhere in there, we brought up impacts of the Initiative Act as well, just so we can understand kind And then I, specifically for licensing committee, kind of looking at strategic plan 1.2, the intended approaches outlined in that, and seeing if we need to schedule separate time for it.
Thank you. I appreciate that we're including our strategic plan. Very nice.
Something I wanted to consider or have a discussion on in the future is about our board taking a stance on, and kind of along those same lines of, our specialty program and recognition. I think it would go a long way to acknowledge the fact that we have specialties within the chiropractic profession where people have, attained higher levels of education and quote, diplomate or postgraduate type levels. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that in light of what's, with Woods Bill, that we as a board acknowledge that those specialties exist, that we acknowledge the extra effort that people have done beyond their chiropractic education to become, quote, experts or a high level of understanding in those respective fields, recognizing the DAC bar, the orthopedic, the pediatrics, the neurology, and so forth. That I think that that's something our board, should acknowledge. And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with FCLB and NBCE and what Karen Campion's trying to accomplish as well. And maybe we could, as they get their part, we can adopt something that says that we acknowledge, those specialty boards that have attained that higher level of accreditation. That I know Dr. Campion's trying to establish. So,
Are you
it's
thinking
not-
like position paper?
Not so much that, just that our board acknowledges that they exist and that we acknowledge them. That if someone has attained that level, that we acknowledge that specialty, so that, in light of the, stuff that's coming down the pipe, it's like, listen, you can't just all of a sudden take, 50, 60 years of specialties within a discipline and say you can't use that terminology anymore. So creating an agenda item where we can discuss that, and I'll personally take that on, and I know Dr. Daniels and I are talking to a lot of people right now in relation to this, that we can get, and I know that, that it's being discussed at these levels at the NBCE with Dr. Karen Campion. So I think that's going to give us, some more strength in our position that, a governing body that's well established and well recognized within the chiropractic community is taking a stance on those levels of accreditation as well. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anything else? Future agenda items from the board? No, hearing none. I'd like to open this agenda item for public comment. Dr. Green, please come on up. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm Chris Green. I'm Dr. Green. And I have two suggestions for next year. One would be a social media guidelines, if the board could pursue that. The goal would be, I've got 3 goals on that. One would be, excuse me, to clearly identify the healthcare providers or chiropractors' responsibility to conform to professionalism, ethics, and scientific accuracy when communicating through social media services like Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. The second would be to, in the guidelines specific to California, to explain relevant aspects of Business and Profession Code Section 651, which talks about advertising for healthcare professionals. It's very specific relative to social media in the sense of identifying material facts as it relates to non-traditional techniques and/or techniques or services that are not taught at chiropractic colleges. So to address that aspect specifically, meaning BPC 651, and then also to address the issue of secure means of communicating with patients, for example, through texting. Security is an issue with just like the text on your iPhone, so that's a matter of concern too. There are other boards, not a lot. The Tennessee board, chiropractic board, has a policy on social media. The Ontario Chiropractic College, they have a pretty healthy guideline on social media. I spoke to them just the other day. The Nova Scotia, our friends up in Nova Scotia, they have actually a regulation on social media for their chiropractors. So they actually have a regulation on it. And then FSMB, which is Federation of State Medical Boards, which would be like a sister to FCLB. They have a very, very lengthy report on social media and electronic communications, as does the nursing board as well, their state board, or their state organization. So that's number one. Number two would be the consideration of looking at the issue. If you've heard of trauma-informed care, there's also the idea of trauma-informed investigations. Recently, at the FARB Convention Regulatory Law Seminar for FARB, the Washington State Medical Board did a presentation on trauma-informed investigations, or the trauma-informed approach. And the question would be like, why trauma-informed? Well, it comes out of the fact that 70% of the US population has a history of trauma. And just to give you an idea of what that means. So this is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is part of HHS. They define trauma as this. Individual trauma results from an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. So the idea of trauma-informed investigation is relevant when you look at that 70% statistic. Nationally, it's even higher in Canada. And factor that into, one, of course, for a complainant or a patient, especially in a sexual boundaries issue, you would want to use a trauma-informed approach. That would include your enforcement analyst and the investigator. And then the other thing that was spoken of at FARB is that 70% means that there's a good chance there are multiple staff members at the board, as well as board members themselves, who fall into that category, which then means that investigating these cases and handling them can be traumatic for the individual. And so it would be wise to take that into consideration and saying, what are we doing to make sure that the board is protected and accommodated in these ways? Because we know that the odds are that that's an issue. And then finally is a concern for the respondent. Now, not so much so on the enforcement side of it, but after the final order and stipulation, it certainly becomes an issue because these are people and they're licensees, and we're concerned about them in that respect. And so for that reason, should the board choose to do some kind of remedial continuing education or something to that effect, but taking into consideration the impact for the licensee, the respondent, and the fact that they themselves may have similar concerns too as it relates to trauma themselves, or ACEs, if you're familiar with that term. So I would suggest that the board, in all of your free time, look at this issue of trauma-informed investigations for next year. And that's what I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Green.
You're welcome.
Especially appreciate your consideration of, the licensees who are going through rehabilitation and their needs and the likelihood that they will return to the profession, and appreciate that. Thank you. And we'll have staff reach out, and if we can share those documents, and can we post them later to the board meeting materials, if appropriate. I assume they will be, but okay. Thank you. Any other public comment on agenda item 18, future agenda items? Seeing and hearing none. We'll move on to agenda item 19, and we will recess this meeting until Friday, October 20th, 2023. And are we 9 a.m. start time again? And I know I don't need a motion to adjourn. I like to get a motion to adjourn, so I would accept a motion to adjourn this meeting at
Let's go.
3:03 p.m.
Is it a motion to adjourn or a motion?
Motion to recess.
Recess.
Yeah, it says adjourn. Yeah.
I'll move to recess until tomorrow morning.
Thank you, seconded. Meeting recessed. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you tomorrow.
And may I